Blame It on Vanity, Hollywood, Hell in Heaven. Published, produced, authored, and graphically designed by Denise Matthews. Forward, I want to thank Jesus with a pure heart for lifting me up. All the way to heaven we go. Thank you, Pastors Willie and Roxanne Harper, for the winning and healing of my soul, and most of all for your sincere spiritual parental love towards me. Thank you, JC fans, along with my dear family to whom flow so many prayers from my bedside. Many thanks to all those that read me and are one because of my love for my God, Jesus. And also to Impact Printing in Hayward, California, Eric Elder and Renee Seal, my new sweet friends who printed my books so easily, perfectly, and quickly. Wow, thanks. And lastly, to Carmen Anderson, for it is because of your kind generosity that my book is again printed up with joy. Thank you, sweet Christine, my eternal friend forever. So much love and many blessings to all from on high. To contact me directly, email me at buythebook@blameitonvanity.com or denise.matthews@att.net. To purchase these fantastic True Face skincare and makeup products, please purchase from my site. I am blessed with a percentage. www.denisematthews.n like November, S like Sarah products.com. The year was 1940. The country I speak of with great dismay was that of Deutschland, meaning Germany. World War II gave itself over to the grave, miserably sinking into a quicksand of depression and monumental, earth-shattering emotional distress. Hitler reigned with merciless insanity, a calculated evil mathematically grieving the nations. So we can perceive the nation's reply to Hitler's heinous demise was a gutted heart of devastation inconsolable. He, being the most vicious of enemies, chiefly to the Jews, compromised to complete the most heinous of crimes known to mankind, murder, and that by torment and torture. The number of souls deteriorating was that of a large count. Dark red blood slid down into the city sewers like a tap gushing out water. Stray dogs lapped up the excess blood, swallowing it deep into their bellies to keep themselves from starving. Charred and bloody bodies were scattered, lying everywhere, having been torn to shreds by detonated bombs exploding in the compounds of the courtyards. Those alive turned into their own accelerated heartbeats. Thus, the sting of a more powerful ringing in their ears was driven through from the blast of bombs vomiting out of the sky. The explosion of violent screams hovered over dead bodies, became silenced in a little girl's ears by a train whistle blown loudly from the conductor's mouth. So now, picture if you will, in the small town called Hearns, giant clouds of black and gray smoke billowing high from the top of a locomotive. The monstrous black train moved slowly in the distance down the rusty iron track. A small child named Helga was daintily dressed in her fall coat and hand-crocheted dress that Grandma made for her. Tiny blazoned red curls spilled gently out from beneath her gray cap, and her tears cascaded down from her grayish-green eyes, the kind of tears that always went unnoticed by her mother. Her cheeks flushed the color of two small, ripe red apples bitten by the cold, crisp air. Helga missed her grandma, and that was why she cried. Her mother, Katie, would have been described as that of a handsome young woman, appealing to the eye just the same. She was clad in a simple gray wool suit with a black fedora pulled down tightly upon her head. She walked carefully, carrying a dark leather clutch bag under her arm. Her facial expressions depicted her demeanor, and her demeanor had been known to be insufferable at times. She walked with her head significantly high, like that of a peacock, even somewhat delicately pompous. The world should obey her voice, so she thought, and the winds did comply with her magisterial stride. Whenever the discussion proposed its way into the political arena, indeed the subject was met with her forked tongue, followed by her tight lip. Katie's voice was rough and low, just like her father's, and when she laughed aloud, it came up from her belly like a thunderous roar, turning about heads to stare in her direction. Her tongue held little back when lashing out, and no words were ever returned from the helpless ones sinking before her. She acted as if she was afraid of nothing, but in reality she was deeply afraid and terribly insecure. Little Helga always remained silent before her mother. At that moment she was trying hard to keep up with her large steps. She covered her tiny eardrops when the conductor blew his whistle the second time. She was reminded of the roaring alarms that blasted through the streets daily. They consisted of 3 distinctive warnings. the last alarm cautioned the people that time had run out. Then the old warplanes would begin to eject bombs into their peculiar bantam towns while men, women, and children fled the streets in a panic. They scurried like little ants into small cubbyholes, determined to find a sufficiently secure place to hide. But this was the train station, and Grandma told her earlier that she had nothing to fear. Little Helga's heart told her a different story. Her feelings, being somewhat fragile, drifted back to the alleyway to the echoes of high-pitched, squealing children playing a silly little game of hide-and-go-seek. This made her feel better inside. However, the bullets were very real that she picked up along the roadside yesterday. She and the other children dumped them inside the Nazi helmets they found in the trenches and skipped their way home. Helga stared down at her clean clothes and realized that she hadn't been dressed like this in a very long time. Today she was all cleaned up and as pretty as her portrait that hung on Grandma's bedroom wall. Little Helga was about to board the train at the tender age of 4, motherless. She stared ahead, watching all the other children whimper and whine. They latched on, desperately grasping their mama's legs and bellies and breasts for fear of abandonment. Others lay seemingly tormented, pounding their fists in the dirt. Tears streamed down all their rosy pink cheeks, and they choked back their sobs. Helga noticed how dry and callous Katie's fingers were against her soft skin. It had been a long time since this woman that Grandma said was her mother had touched her. She stared up at her with a dry, stoic look upon her face and studied her movements. Who was this woman looming down upon her? Helga had so many questions on her mind that went unanswered, especially about what had happened earlier that morning. Reluctantly, Katie had been chosen to take her daughter to the train that day. She would much prefer to be anywhere else, however, because of Grandma's illness, it was unavoidable. Little Helga heard the whole whispered conversation when Katie came to take her away from the only loving home she had ever known. Helga called her Grandma Muddy, meaning mother. Muddy had taken care of Helga since she was spit out of the womb, but at that moment she was taken ill and confined to her bed. It was impossible for her to walk the cobblestone roads that day. Katie and Muddy argued as usual. Earlier, the Marcotte family drew close to Muddy's bedside and watched her suffer through excruciating abdominal pains. After a long duration of insufferable agony, Muddy slumped over the right side of her bed and stared into the child's soft hazel eyes. Muddy tried very hard not to show that her spirit was deeply wounded. Her cough was dry as if a stone was stuck in her throat. Her body was tired and seemed to be asking too much of her. With her breath depleted of all strength and her lips quivering, she spoke gently to the child in her Polish language. "Farewell, my little Helga. You be Muddy's good little girl and don't be afraid." Helga climbed up onto the bed and gripped her arms tightly around Muddy's body and sunk her head deep in the pit of Grandma's bosom. Muddy touched the little girl's face delicately as if mesmerized, all the while mesmerizing each tiny gold freckle that lay gently like snowflakes upon her face. A sour cry. Where has he gone? Helga's eyes twinkled softly with light tears as she nervously twisted her curls around her fingers. She only did this when she got scared. Little Helga studied Grandma's hands. Even though they were old and the skin fit loosely to her bones, they were still as soft as the cream satin bow that Grandma had clipped to her hair. With much regret, Muddy knew it might be the last time she ever sees Helga. She tried hard not to cry in front of the child, but she couldn't stop the tears from crawling wearily down her cheeks. Be brave, my little one," she said. "Remember how much Muddy loves you." Papa mourned at the sight of it all. He treasured his beloved wife, and he adored little Helga too. He despised Hitler, and at that very moment he hated the whole ugly world. The solemn question in everyone's mind was, who would be left breathing among the dead? That morning, Katie left the house with the child and a small suitcase in tow. A trail of tears belonging to little Helga fell down on the floorboards and right on out the door. "Pay attention and stop daydreaming," Katie said to Helga. Katie, now frustrated, stopped at the station booth to buy her daughter a one-way ticket to a place very far away from her. She examined a large black and white poster of Adolf Hitler. She hated him and wanted to spit, but she knew better. She'd voiced her opinions about his disturbing cruelty rather than empathetically in front of the family. Neither Katie nor Helga shared little, if anything, but a few awkward glances between themselves that morning. Katie began to ponder her past for the umpteenth time, and her disappointed facial expression more than agreed. They were unbearable thoughts which caused her heart to skip a few beats faster. Her eyes swelled up slightly with what she felt were useless tears, but her heart knew better. All her thoughts were very real. She and the child headed for the next set of steps, and again Helga tried hard to keep up with her mother, so she awkwardly reached for her hand. The crowd grew exceedingly great around them. Helga's eyes got wide with fear. Katie walked in silence in an oblivious trance-like state of mind. The same old broken record of disturbing thoughts kept rolling around in her head over and over. She slowly retreated into her secret place, bathing in her self-pity, conjuring up destructive feelings about her past. There she could sink in and bury everything she abhorred about life and pretend it didn't exist, including the small child choking her baby finger. She meditated back a few years, thinking about how happy she had been when Joseph, her fiancé, arrived at her door.